news coming in regard to a plane crash that has taken place in Ahmedabad.
Many people have been killed.
There appear to be no survivors.
I'm going to read some of the comments. Indians are like cockroaches. If they can't drive trucks without crashing them, how do you expect them to fly a plane without crashing it?
People would be commenting like, go back to where you came from. White people spent 500 plus years in India.
How do you feel?
Really disappointed, hurt, and I feel angry. It's quite possible the Prime Minister would have commented.
On 12th of July, an Air India flight was flying from Ahmedabad to London. And suddenly, it crashed on a hostel, killing over 279 people. But today, this episode isn't about the crash, it is what followed. We express our condolences to the people who are going through the losses. But in the meantime, what followed was the racism, the treatment against Indians, and the digital violence that happened. And for the same, today we have with us Daizy Mann. She is the founder of the Australian South Asian Centre. She's a comedian and she does the Brown Women comedy. She's an advocate for the South Asian Australians. She was a delegate for Australia India Youth Dialogue. Thank you, Daizy, for coming here and talking about such a sensitive topic. But I think it is time that we speak up about it.
I think so, and I think it's a really important topic as well.
Yeah, and it's just, I feel a lot of it has been just taken out of the blow or the box that has happened off lately. And you being an actual Indian Australian, you were born and brought up here?
Yeah, I was born in countryside Australia.
Wow, that is so Aussie.
Regional.
That's like Bogan Aussie.
Yeah.
Would you say your inside soul is Bogan Aussie?
Bogan Aussie, I think I'm a country bum on the inside.
Okay.
Yeah. Grew up, I had a farm. I learnt manual on a tractor.
Oh, wow.
We had oranges, so yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Anyway, but I felt that the right person to speak about such a topic is Daizy, and that's why we have Daizy with us here today. Before we get into this, I would like to talk about the memes and the comments that people are making, which is horrendous. I would like to know, what are your thoughts and how do you feel about this? I'm going to read some of the comments. One of the comments was, Indians are like cockroaches. They just won't die.
I just think it's disgusting. I think, whenever you're comparing people to insects, you're clearly dehumanizing them. And I think it's just disgusting that people are able to leave these comments online with no repercussions.
Exactly. There's another one which says, if they can't drive trucks without crashing them, how do you expect them to fly a plane without crashing it?
I'm lost for words with some of these things.
I
you know what I mean?
It's just disgusting. Like, even they drive trucks and it drives the whole economy of Australia.
The majority of the goods you probably have in your house got there because an Indian drove a truck and got it to you the majority of the time.
Exactly. And if anyone would drive anything, accidents can happen.
Yeah.
So you can't just blame, it's because majority of them are Indian, so then you think that they don't know how to drive things, which is so stereotype. This one I really hate, but I think we should talk about it. Someone said that if it was any other race, he would have felt bad. But just because it's Indians, like, he doesn't feel sorry about it.
And I think there's this growing racism specifically towards Indians in Australia, and it's been growing lately. And what's really disappointing is that our legacy media outlets, our largest media outlets, many of them run by Murdoch Media, they not only do not cover any of these incidents around racism, I think they put suggestive headlines that make it worse. They don't moderate the comments. They enable that to thrive because they're realizing it's picking up. So all they care about is the clicks.
Yep, true. And they let the comment section be on for some time, and they let the comments flood, and then when it gets too bad, then they, restrict it. Yeah. Which is like, we restricted it from our end. Now we can't stop people to comment. We have to share about it, which kind of sucks. This is the first time, at least for me, I saw someone like in ABC News cover an event of racism, which felt really good. Like, such a big media platform actually voicing it out. Yeah. It was good.
Yeah, that was the journalist was Angelica Silva, and she is Indian Australian as well. And I was really glad to see that coverage in the ABC. That's our national broadcaster, taxpayer funded.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's rare that these things get talked about. and it's rare that racism gets covered, especially towards Indians.
It's just sad. And then beyond that, have you seen the memes that were going around? I'm going to show you one. Tell me how do you feel? Your background is Punjabi?
Yeah.
Yes. There's this one which says Rajesh with a
Yeah.
Lego set and the thing burning and the pilot out there. How do you feel looking at this?
I don't look at these memes as much because I just feel like it makes me really, really angry.
Yeah.
Really mad that people can do this. And second is sad that
Yeah.
we've reached this stage where we will talk about people like this. And
Yes.
the thing is, a lot of these people will not say this in person to you. So they'll say it in the security and the comfort of their homes behind a screen. And it is much easier to be cruel to people online
Yeah.
than in person.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. I'm going to go through another few. Jesus, is there nothing they can't destroy? Only thing left is an attempt to land on the moon and crash into that thing as well.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure, like, didn't Richard Branson's plane blow up going to the moon too? Didn't his rocket, blow up? Didn't someone's rocket blow up going to the moon?
That's a white person?
Yeah, he's a
Yeah,
white person.
so it doesn't matter.
It's all right. They're allowed to
Yeah,
make mistakes.
yeah.
That's fine.
They can spend how many billions, millions of dollars.
Yeah, they can spend
crashing.
billions of your money sending you to the moon, blowing up, but that's fine. They're still inspirational.
Yep, true. Here's another one. The stench was so bad that the system started to malfunction. I don't know what it is.
I think
with-
it's just so, like, unoriginal. And, like, just calling Indians smelly is just, it's old. People are over it.
Yep.
Come up with something better, mate. Like,
Yeah.
be more original.
True. And then
Yeah.
the thing with stench and curry and all
Yeah.
of that, I'm like,
If you're
dude,
going to be racist, do a better job.
exactly. Like,
Actually be witty.
you know, how do you feel when you read all of this online as an Indian Australian?
I feel really disappointed, I
Yep.
think, and I feel hurt and I feel angry. I think I've got a Punjabi background, but I was born and raised in Australia.
Yep.
And it hurts because I know this racism has been around for a long time.
Yep.
But to see it so unhinged and growing online, like I grew up in countryside Australia.
Yeah.
And I wrote a little bit about some of the racism I experienced in a book called Growing Up Indian in Australia.
Yep.
It's a book there was, I think, 25 plus of us who wrote one chapter each. And it's
Okay.
about stories of people who grew up here, who are of Indian origin. And I wrote about some of the racism I experienced. But, you know, largely it's gotten better. But I think now it's kind of improved and now it's getting worse. Now,
Yeah.
somehow it had some improvement, but it's getting worse. Then again, I was from the regional, like I was from Bint, the village, you know, in
Yeah.
Australia. And things there are always usually worse.
Yep.
Racism, it takes a while for progressive ideas to reach further places. That's just a
Yep.
known fact. So maybe my migrating to Melbourne was, you know, it was a transition and there's a lot less racism. But now online,
It's
it's
crazy.
unhinged. It's just not moderated. There's no repercussions. Legacy media doesn't care. So I guess it makes me just feel pretty disappointed
Yep.
and angry and sad.
Yep, true. Do you think that if this whole incident would have happened, for example, there was a flight, maybe Qantas Airlines was flying from Melbourne to London, and this would have happened in Melbourne, do you think people would have reacted this way, or it would have been a whole different level?
No, I think in fact, if you made fun of anyone that died on that flight, it's quite possible the Prime Minister would have commented and said that's very un-Australian of you to do that. Or it's, you know, people would be commenting like, who said that? And if the person who said that was an immigrant, they'd be like, go back to where you came from.
Exactly.
So it's very selective. It is Australia has a problem with the colour of your skin. And
It
this
does.
this racism is not new. This racism has existed for First Nations people, for Indigenous communities as
Yes.
well. They've been here for 60,000 years plus.
Oh, my
Yet there is a lot of racism towards that community. And it can be within the community too. And I have to say that because sometimes I feel like we forget. Racism isn't just, it's not just against us. I think
Yeah.
Australia has a problem with people who are dark-skinned.
Yeah, true. I think it is a thing. That's why yet First Nations have to fight for their rights, even at this point of time. But I would just say that, you know, it's such an important thing where just not Indians, also, not just Indians who died, but there were Britishers who died and other people, and only one person survived. It doesn't make sense. Like, where's the humanity of people that is going out? It's just so them behaving this way is inhumane.
Yeah. It's incredibly inhumane.
Yeah, I'm just like, I was so shocked and I was angry from within. Like, I love this country. Like, I love Australia. It's such a beautiful place to stay. But when I read people from this country commenting like this, it just hurts personally. Do you feel it's personal?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Especially when it's like, about South Asians, about Indians, it feels quite personal. I mean, I don't hold a lot of respect for these people, obviously, so I don't really care for their opinions in that regard. That online is a crazy space right now.
Yeah.
But I read this, and what bothers me more is that people don't hold these people accountable. The platforms don't, the legacy media doesn't, other supporters, maybe other white Australians could chime in and tell these people.
Yeah.
Like, why should the burden always fall on us to be like, hey, don't be racist to us?
Yeah.
Where are the allies at? We talk about allyship. We talk about people who are like, I don't see color.
Yeah.
But it's like, where are you in the comments? You're not there. You're only there when you're like, someone's calling you racist and you're like, no, I don't see color. But how about standing up in these comment sections and defending humanity?
Exactly. That'd be so nice. Like, I know there are so many nice Australians as well. I've experienced it. You're born and brought up here. You've experienced it as well.
100%, yeah.
What are some of the racist things that you've experienced, growing up?
I think, like I mentioned, I was from countryside Australia. So I remember growing up and I was in a town predominantly with Italian Australians, like usually second generation.
Yeah.
And I remember I went to school one day and I overheard a guy say that I was cute. And I sort of smiled. It was the first time I heard someone say I was cute. And then the girl next to him straight away said, yuck, she's Indian. And then he said, oh, I was just joking, to redeem himself. And I remember hearing that thinking, will we always be lesser than the Italian Australians in this town,
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because those kids' grandparents, I used to work for some of their grandparents during summer. And they used to tell us, I remember one of the grandparents used to be, Daizy, the Australians were so racist to us when we came here. They called us wogs. They told us our salami sandwiches stink. And then I thought, why do your grandchildren now perpetuate this racism? So somehow you facing it is not a reason. You have a choice once you face racism.
Yep.
You decide, will I teach and raise my kids and learn to not other another group? Or will I let them do this because there's a hierarchy of class and systems and someone always has to be better than someone else? I mean, it is very, there's a lot of part of human nature to want to elevate yourself above certain people, right?
Yeah.
And whether this is through caste, class, race, we do this all the time, sometimes without even realizing.
Yeah, true.
And it's something we have to actively prevent and not give in to that I guess that drive to do that, because a lot of people, to make themselves feel better, will do these things because they don't often have inherent self-worth.
Yes. True.
Or it's a community around them that's doing it, so they'll do it too, because we are a product of the people we spend time with.
Yeah, true. But it's sad that with growing time, people are not becoming acceptable, but they are yet looking for their power dynamics. And going back to the whole racism against South Asians, the biggest case that, not biggest, but one of the most famous ones, or I should say infamous ones, that happened in Australia was the 2009 when there was those attacks on students, and Punjabis used to wear pagdis and stuff. They used to face it a lot. Like I've heard of this. I'm not sure. I can't claim if this is right, but I've heard this. The Punjabis stopped wearing their pugs so that they could not be differentiated in a crowd and all, and which is so sad. Like, it's their culture.
It is, yeah. I think what was really interesting during that time that I've sort of read and researched a little bit about is Australia really ended up stepping up and doing something. But sadly, a lot of that was because it was affecting international student numbers. And I don't know if people know, but international students is Australia's second largest export.
Yes.
It's called an export here because we are exporting education.
Yes.
We're importing people, you know. And because the racism was so blatant and people were getting hurt in the streets, Australia, government and the departments did something. They're like, let's start a campaign to make Australia look safe again. Let's crack down on this. Because it's one of the biggest economic drivers. I mean, if you look at your number plate in Victoria, what does it say? We are the education state.
Yes.
And that's because international students really fuel the economy.
They just care about the money, because if Indian students stop coming to Australia, the economy would be affected like crazy.
Yeah.
Economy would be affected, plus who would work, like the part-time and all of those things.
Yeah.
Who's going to drive trucks? Who's going to do all of the work?
All the work, whether it's professionals, whether it's IT jobs, whether it's marketing, creative, immigrants do a lot of these jobs.
Yes, true. This is what my partner said, and I took his line. But he said if for one day all the South Asians stopped working in Australia, it would be total chaos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, True, that is so true.
Well, we make up, I think it's like, what, roughly 1.4, 1.5 million of the population. I know Indians in Australia is about 800,000.
Yep.
And I don't think that number includes international students from memory, but that's just the people who are here who are of Indian origin.
Yep.
So it makes up a fair percentage of the population. Like Punjabi alone is the second most spoken language. I think after Mandarin from memory.
Do you feel like, how can people stand up? I feel lots of people are not standing up. Recently, I did see you stand up. I spoke about it. Then you mentioned Angelica. ABC stood up. But not many people stand up and they don't talk about it. Why do you think this is the case? Or is it's not?
I think the diaspora, or in general, there is this narrative of if we come here and we just work really hard and we get a good house, a good car, we get a good job, we get a promotion, we earn money, our excellence will prove that we belong. Yeah. Our excellence will show people that we are successful. But unfortunately, this isn't always the case.
Yep.
Unfortunately, there's a wave of racism that's now happening almost like because of that excellence. There's this envy. There's these unemployed white Australian people sitting at home saying, oh, why is the CEO of everything Indian? What the hell? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So you always have this disenfranchised group that there can be racism towards groups because they're poor and black or brown, but there's also racism towards other people who are successful and brown because it's like, you're taking my job now. That's a job I want, Yes. So I think there's this thing, and I think the people who can should speak up. Yeah. But I also acknowledge that not everybody can. If you're in a situation where maybe you're an international student with a vicarious visa, like you don't know if you can stay, you don't know what you can say online, you don't want, then I understand that it can be harder. I have friends who came as international students and they only felt comfortable speaking about things. For some of them once had their citizenship.
Yep, true.
Or the ones that didn't want it, they did. They didn't care. So I think it can be, depends on your position and it depends on the context. Like, are you speaking up just online or is it happening in your workspace?
Yep. Someone told me at their workspace, this is a kind of racism, 100%. She is brown and she's Aussie brown. Like she's like you, Indian Aussie. But she said she was hired, she got to know later, to fill the quota of like, a colored diverse person, and that kind of sucks. What the hell? Not on merit but on color.
Well, I don't know, I think that line of thinking is interesting, merit or quota. I think that's what people want you to think, that these two put against each other. You can have both. You can be the most qualified and also that company wide has a quota to fill, because what's happened is there's been hundreds of years of racism. I mean, women in the workforce, everything, right? So quotas exist to undo past injustice. So quotas can be important, and the narrative often driven is, people should get a job on their merit. But they kind of put merit and quota up against each other, but that's not always accurate. Because the quotas are needed to undo systemic years and years. That's why when you look at the top CEOs of ASX companies, it's predominantly men. I think I read there's more men named Bob than there are like women in the entire ASX companies, as executives. Like there's some ridiculous facts like that. Might be Matt or Max or something, but there's some facts like that. So I think it's like quotas have a reason to be there as well, and it's to undo this past harm.
Yeah, but the way I think it's communicated or said, that makes the whole difference.
Yeah, well, people say this. People say this all the time. They're like, "Oh, you got that job because of your skin color."
Yeah, that is what is wrong.
Like, people say that, and it's like, but you know what? I don't take it personally now. I'm like, oh well, watch me be very competent at it. Watch me achieve a lot. I don't care why you think I got this job. I'm here now, and I'm going to do a really good job at it.
Yeah, true.
But going back to what you're saying and people speaking up, I feel like there is this narrative that if we just do really well as Indians, people will respect us.
Yes.
And that's not always true.
Yes.
No, because this disenfranchised group in society will not. So I think that's where, like, in some ways, civic citizenship, getting involved in your community is important. But the burden is not just on. I'm not just saying, Indian community should get more involved and more engaged.
Yeah.
I think there's also something to do with this, like, unhinged racism online, like the platforms.
Yes.
I think legacy media needs to do a better job. It's really disappointing that literally it's only the ABC who's covered this racism.
True. There are so many others, like, I don't want to name them, but all of us know who we're talking about.
Yeah, there was one article in The Australian, and The Australian is generally quite problematic as a publication, mentioned, but that article was written by Aarti Bedgiri, who was also the editor of the book I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And that was a good article on Australia's long history with racism and a problem we have. For example, when there is like anti-Semitism, like against Jewish people in Australia, which it gets called out, rightly so, it should be, but it gets all the media, everyone covering it, ministers, prime ministers. Where are they at now with this unhinged racism against Indians? It's clear with their lack of reaction that they're treating Indians as second-class citizens.
Yes, and then when they want the whole relation with the Indian government, the prime minister of the country or the government bodies of the country will be welcoming the prime minister.
Then they're putting on like flowers on their neck. The premier's putting on flowers on their neck, and I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
you know?
and then they're eating the food, and they're like, oh my God, I love to eat with hands. And I'm like,
Australia views India as an economic partner.
Yes.
And the thing is, it's a very transactional relationship and it's very obvious. India is such a big country. Sometimes they're like, who even is Australia?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so I think that we've got to move beyond that. They need to see India as a partner beyond like just bilateral economic. A lot of the narrative around the partnership with India started when China's economy started growing, China started stabilizing, they had some issues with China in terms of ministers saying things. And they're like, all the universities, like, what next? Oh, India's our second biggest market. Let's go there. Let's double down in India. That's where we're going to get our money. That's where we're going to get our students. It's a very distorted way in a one-way relationship sometimes. And it's very obvious because a lot of politicians just show up for the community around election time.
Yes.
Where
they'll come and dress up for the community. They'll go for Diwali festival and they're like, but this is the time where you stand up.
Yeah.
And that feels like the Indian community or the South Asian community, you're a part of it and you actually make us feel included because we do so much.
What people don't say says a lot about what they care about. Yeah. And here when politicians and media and everyone is silent, the community is hurting. The community is seeing this and saying, do you even value us? Yeah, and if you do this again and again and again, it really distorts the trust that we have in our institutions. And trust in institutions is everything when it comes to like a solid democracy.
Yeah, for sure.
Imagine if India's Independence Day was held on the day the British came.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was held on the day that the Angrez in the Raj hoya si,
Yep.
Then what?
Yep.
Indian Independence Day is celebrated when British left.
Yep.
In Australia, the Independence Day, Australia Day, is celebrated when the British came.
Yep.
And that's why there's a big narrative to change the day.
Yep.
And why does this matter for migrants? I think it really does because currently citizenship ceremonies happen on Australia Day as well.
True.
That's a big thing.
It is a big thing for immigrants. For them, it is like the brightest day.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, this country is welcome. I'm becoming a part of this country.
Yeah. And people are like, why are you dimming my light? I've gotten my citizenship. But it's like, it's not dimming your light. Sometimes to love a country is to stand up for the injustice there. Sometimes, I feel like I get this from both communities. Like if I say something against Punjabi or Indians, they're like, oh, well, we'll stay in Australia. We'll stay in your lane. Why are you even speaking at it? Yeah. And when I say something about Australians, people are like, go back to where you came from. Like, I'm from Australia, mate. But also, like, both people say this. And I think that defense is just not fair because I think a big part of being a good citizen in a country is to talk about the problems and then work on the solutions.
Yep.
It's 100%. Like I talk about this because I care about it. Yep. You may see it as a complaint, but complaining, speaking up and voicing concerns is a way to improve a place because how else will we improve if we don't talk about this?
Yep.
We cannot just ignore it and bury it and be like, this is a great country. Because that's propaganda.
Yeah, and it's like just burying the hatchet, under the carpet for the longest time before everything just bursts out.
Because I feel like we cannot get special treatment. We cannot say, don't belittle us when we sometimes belittle others. I think we've got to give all of these issues equal attention and also educate our own community on these things.
I think, to be honest, like I am an immigrant. I came as an immigrant. It's never spoken much about like the First Nations people. I study in a university in Australia. The only time when the First Nation thing is spoken if there's a ceremony going on, so someone comes and gives the acknowledgement. But otherwise, the Australian system, which would ideally educate you. If I am an immigrant out here, how would I know about the First Nations? They only educate you when there's like this whole graduation or another ceremony by by one of the committees out there.
I'm curious, like you said your partner was going for a citizenship ceremony and in that test they have something about First Nations.
I feel it's we're talking about racism against Indians specifically, obviously after the Ahmedabad plane crash, which is really bad. But at the same time, when I started speaking about it, I came across and I was researching, and I came across racism against other color, like people of color. Let's put it that way. There's this really famous activist Australian. He's South African, Australian. So he is Aussie like yourself, but he's South African heritage. And there was a white activist group standing outside the police station and saying black people should go back or something like that. A whole propaganda, and the police didn't do anything to stop them, which is so sad. How can these guys say things like this outside a police station and they're not getting stopped? And these were like a white activist group, which is not okay.
Yeah, no, I think there's this like there needs to be more done to crack down on this.
Yeah.
And it's just not taken seriously.
Yep.
And the longer it's allowed to fester, the more it may lead to like dangerous situations and safety concerns. And it's unfortunate. Often the police only act when it becomes violent and when it becomes like
Yep.
they have no issues stopping certain protests to do with Palestine and Gaza. The police here, so why aren't they stopping these types of things?
Exactly.
It's very selective. It's very selective of who gets protection.
True. And then, saying that, these guys, the police is not stopping these guys in person when they can see it's happening, who's doing it. And we were talking about speaking up online. So when you speak up online, it does make a lot of people scared. And when you speak up online, I'm so sure you also experience it, and I did it recently, the comments that you get are just horrifying. We're talking about racism and not to do it, and then more people come in and act racist on that, and I'm like, are you serious?
It's horrible, and I feel like there's two different messages. There's something like if I speak to people who are speaking up online, I would say to them, the comments are there, and you need to find a way to not take them personally, because the work you're doing is incredibly important to speak up, and the work you're doing, it's raising awareness, it's speaking up for injustice, against injustice.
True.
And it's really important. And then I feel like the comment I would say, or the message I would say to sort of institutions and platforms and legacy media is it's your responsibility to do something about these two. It's your responsibility to step in, to moderate, to create policies and things like that which prevent this. I mean, there's a hate speech. There used to be a hate speech.
There used to be, right?
Is that gone? I don't
It's
remember.
gone.
Really? It's gone.
It is gone.
Okay, yeah. See, a lot of this has come from America.
Yes.
These tech platforms, they've started in America, right? And a lot of this, with Trump becoming president, has led, and this whole focus, it's really interesting, this whole focus of freedom of speech used to be a left-wing issue. It used to be like a very left-leaning issue. And somehow, in a weirdly converted, in a very odd way, the right-wing, extreme right-wing, have adopted this as their issue, the freedom of speech issue.
Yep.
And it has become the freedom of speech to discriminate, the freedom of speech to spread hate, the freedom of speech. It has become something else altogether. Freedom of speech used to be a good thing. Do you know what I mean? And now it's like, well, hang on. What are we free to discuss things that are hurting other people, that are encouraging and inciting violence? This should not be allowed, but it is these days. This is the era we live in. It's like this sort of, tech-run society.
Yes, for sure. It's freedom of speech has its own like two-way sword. Like it's a double-edged sword, if that's the right way to say it. The people who are being racist, like, what about our freedom of speech? I can say whatever I want, and then just what you said is the other part of it. So it kind of sucks. But even another fact that I also want to point out is people start picking up these small things. Like the way I say economy is very different. How do you say economy?
Economy.
I don't know. Someone was just like pointing out that you don't know how to pronounce this. What are you? I'm like, are you serious? The whole video is about something else.
As an Indian Australian, I'm obviously aware this is the way I speak and I sound very Australian, right? And I have to be honest, I think when I used to correct people on their English before, I don't do that anymore.
Yep.
Because I'm like, British people, white people spent 500 plus years in India. First couple of hundred years through East India Company, and then by colonizing and taking control. Many of them did not bother to even learn the local language. They enforced English as a superior language onto other people, right?
Yep.
And they've enforced it onto millions. They were outnumbered, but they still enforced it. So who are we here to tell immigrants to speak a language properly and pronounce the accent differently? You know,
Yep.
who are we to who are white people to say that when, you know, white people spent 500 years in colonizing India and didn't even learn language?
Yep.
I think sometimes, like, if things are like grammatically incorrect, you might offer it up, but I don't think what really annoys me is when someone has a powerful message and the only comment you've got is, "Oh, you said economy wrong. It's not economy, it's economy." It's like, dude, did you not even listen to the message?
Exactly.
Is that all that matters to you? And often it's used as it's a form of racism to mock someone
Yep.
with these things, I think.
And people pronounce different things different ways. If a French guy, people are like, what's the sexiest accent? Most people are like, oh my God, French or Italian.
Yeah.
But they're not speaking it right. What about that?
No. A European
Yeah.
languages are sexy.
Yeah.
European accents are sexy.
Yeah.
Indian accents are mocked.
I feel
that's
the
just a form of
enunciations are the
racism.
best of Indians because they're taught to like pronounce everything. But obviously each country has its own accent and they will speak their own way.
Exactly. And I just think that, you know, people's accent, it's just often the mockery of that and the judgment of that. It's something that's been going on for a long time. And like, you know, I look at, like, my mom has an accent and I look at the way people talk to her and treat her compared to how they talk to me and treat me. You know what I mean? Because like I sound like this. So I get a different treatment to her.
I feel like, for example, if you are Aussie Indian, I am Indian. So when I open my mouth and start talking, people will look at, and then the minute you start talking because of your accent, the way they were treating me, they won't treat you the same. And I'm like, why? Like, how does it matter? Even if we have the same education, same life experiences, built on the
Yeah.
same thing, it wouldn't matter. But
Yeah.
just because of your accent, I feel you would be treated better.
That's true. You know, I worked at a call center when I was like 15 years ago or something, and I was 18 years old. So it was less than 15 years ago, but I worked at a call center over summer. And I remember we used to have to make like 300 calls a day. Not everyone answered, but we'd call them. And I remember the number of times someone would say, "Oh, you're not bloody Indian. Are you calling me from India? I fucking don't want to talk to an Indian." And I would just be like, and they'd be like, "Oh, you got to go back to where you came from." And I'd be like, and I just say, "No, you go back." I would just start having this argument with them with an Indian accent because I just get so annoyed.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I got to make 300 calls a day. I got to entertain myself somehow.
Yeah.
And so I would just have these arguments with them just for fun, just to amuse myself.
Yeah.
But it's just that you know, and I have a friend who used to work for the Fair Work Ombudsman, which is the ombudsman for like if you make complaints against your employer.
Okay.
And she's Indian.
Okay.
So she used to get a call. She's a lawyer and she used to get a call, and she told me the call she got once, and this guy's like, "Oh yeah, you know, my boss is bloody Indian. You know what they're like. Yeah, I just want to make sure he's not ripping me off, and you know how those Indians can be. Yeah." And my sister's just like, she's Indian.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Yeah, tell us what your boss is doing, but I don't give, you know, his ethnicity is irrelevant here."
Yeah.
And Australia does this very often. Australia does this very often. It happens a lot in news and headlines.
Yep.
Is that when a crime is committed by a white person, no one says a white person committed a crime. You know, it's
Yes.
the details of the crime that make the headline.
Exactly.
When an Indian person or a brown person or an Arabic or a Middle Eastern commits a crime, then their ethnicity is a big part of the title. Yeah.
But, you know, getting back to the Ahmedabad plane crash, I know it was a very sad incident that happened, and it's very sad that so many people died. But I would say the spark of racism that has happened, which is horrifying to see and hear, and it's personally, it's just disheartening. But on the bright side, I would say, people are talking about it. I have seen more people talking about this racism thing. Maybe because I spoke about it, so I'm getting more in my feed. Could be a scenario. But at least I'm seeing more of it. And I think maybe it's time for things to change and people to rise.
I think it is. I think when like one person talks about it, more people get emboldened and get the courage to talk about it. I think it works both ways. Like when people are commenting horrible things, other people with those pre-existing beliefs feel emboldened to also comment. But then the other way is that if you feel like you need to say something about what's happening, go ahead and say it, because you will inspire other people to speak up as well, right? Like you plant a seed and then that spreads and other people start to speak up about this. And that's when you start to actually, you know, when legacy media is silent silent, when most, authorities are silent, when people in power are silent, then it's up to people to really get up and say something and hold those people accountable.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I think this is what gives me hope that more people are speaking. What gives you hope as an Indian Australian?
It's a good question. Around, like, as in, you mean for...
As around people speaking up against racism, because this has been going on since a while. We've just been talking about it, and it's happening in different forms. But you specifically, as an Indian Australian, hearing about these incidents and everything that we just spoke about, what gives you hope going in the near future? And you've seen so much, like going from countryside to here, city side. What are your thoughts?
I think it's similar. I think what gives me hope is the people speaking up and the power that people have. I generally believe that people have a lot of power and they don't realize what power that they have.
Yeah.
Often people, there's this study called the Edelman Trust Barometer, and they've researched and used like over 17,000 people, and they measure trust and credibility in society. And it's a very extensive report, but the gist of it is the most trustworthy people, the people trust most, is people that are like them, pretty much, are people peers at the same level, right? And whereas what people think the people think are more trustworthy is CEOs, journalists, institutions. These are the things that people think are more trustworthy and more credible.
Yeah.
But the people that people trust are people like them. So maybe in a similar job, maybe a similar gender, maybe similar age. That's kind of who we trust. So I think one thing that's empowering about that is that you have a lot more power than you think you do.
Yep.
You are more likely. If you release a statement or make a video, that's more likely to influence more people than possibly if the CEO of a company you work at did it.
Yeah.
Because people already mistrust those institutions.
True.
So I think that to me, that fundamental truth of how much power people have, it gives me hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Daizy, for sharing that with us. That felt really soulful, and it felt like it just came from within.
Yeah.
And I love that you were so candid and so unfiltered. Please share this with people around. They should know about the racism happening in Australia and speak up. And if you have experienced racism, please comment down below. If there's any way we can help or we can help voice it, we would love to do that. Thank you so much, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time.